The dampness of the night had settled deep into my bones, a persistent cold ache that felt like an incurable disease. Every breath I took was a sharp reminder of my place in this world that was once my home. Next to me, Thor, the family's old German shepherd, snored softly, his warm back pressed against mine in an instinctive act of canine solidarity. He at least didn't see me as an intruder. We were two aged souls, worn down, sharing our exile in the darkest corner of the garden. I opened my eyes. Through the worn canvas of the tent that served as my bedroom, the sky was beginning to tinge with a pale blue, heralding a dawn I did not welcome. Every morning was the same pain in my hips, the same cold dew soaking the thin blanket that served as my sheet, the same smell of wet grass and dog, and above all the same deafening silence that preceded the cacophony of my daily humiliation. My name is Esperanza Mendoza. I am 78 years old, and this is the story of how the great love of my life rescued me from beyond the grave. I wiggled my toes, numb from the cold. I felt every one of my joints as if they were filled with ground glass. I remembered mornings in the matrimonial bed I shared with Roberto for 52 years. He would always wake first and make coffee, bringing me a steaming cup with that smile that lit up his entire face. "For my Esperanza," he would murmur, kissing my forehead. Now my son-in-law, Carlos, brought me a plastic plate with leftovers from the previous night's dinner, if he remembered. Everything changed when Roberto passed. A swift, silent heart attack that took him one afternoon while he was pruning his rose bushes. My world crumbled, and into that void, my son Miguel and his wife, Valeria, moved like vultures. "Mom, you can't be alone," they said with honeyed voices that couldn't quite disguise their greed. "Come live with us. We'll take care of you." Blind with grief, I agreed. I left the house full of memories, believing in filial kindness. But the kindness lasted as long as the mourning period. 1 month later, my room was full of Valeria's little things. 2 months later, they moved me to the living room sofa. And when Thor, who slept in the garden, started howling at night, Valeria came up with the perfect solution. "It's just for a little while, Mama Esperanza," she said, with that fake smile that never reached her eyes of ice, "until you get used to it. Besides, it will be company for Thor. He's old, like you. You'll understand each other." Miguel, my own son, the boy I had held in my arms, whom I taught to read, whom I comforted when he broke his arm riding a bike, said nothing. He looked down. That was the first night I slept here, in this olive-green tent that smelled of mold and defeat. A noise from the house made me hold my breath. The sliding glass door opened with a soft squeak. It was Carlos, Valeria's husband, a gray, subdued man who lived in his wife's shadow. He carried a bowl in his hand. "Good morning, Doña Esperanza," he whispered, almost ashamed. He approached and handed me the bowl. It was watery oatmeal, without sugar. "It's chilly today," he added, not daring to look me in the eye. "Thank you, Carlos," I said, and my voice sounded hoarse, like a whisper of dry leaves. He nodded and retreated quickly, as if my misery were contagious. Thor stretched and licked my hand with his rough tongue. I gave him a spoonful of oatmeal, which he devoured eagerly. "You're a true gentleman, old friend," I murmured into his ear. He responded with a slight wag of his tail. From my tent, I could see Valeria's perfect house, straight lines, white walls, enormous windows that revealed a pristine and cold interior. Nothing remained of the warm, cluttered home Roberto and I had built. Valeria had modernized it. She had thrown out the solid wood furniture Roberto loved so much, the photographs on the walls, the books, everything replaced by minimalist objects that looked more like sculptures than useful things. It was a show home, not a home. The sound of laughter came from the kitchen. Miguel and Valeria having breakfast. I could hear my daughter-in-law's high-pitched voice, sure and domineering, and my son's fainter replies. When had he become so weak? When had he allowed his backbone to be removed? I remembered the strong, caring man he had become, the one who cried with happiness when his daughter Sophia was born. Now he was an echo, a shadow that obeyed orders. My granddaughter Sophia, 17 years old, was my only ray of light, a sensitive, intelligent girl who saw the situation with a clarity that shamed the adults. Often, she would sneak into the garden at night with an extra blanket or a thermos of hot chocolate. "Grandma, this isn't right," she would say, her large dark eyes filled with indignant tears. "She's, my dear. Don't worry about me. You focus on your studies. Get away from here," I would respond, stroking her cheek. But she would shake her head. "I can't leave you alone." The sun began to warm the tent canvas, creating a greenhouse effect that momentarily relieved the cold in my bones. Today was an important day. Roberto's lawyer, Mr. Castillo, a righteous and loyal man, was coming to the house. After my husband's death, everything had been in limbo. Roberto handled all our affairs. He was meticulous. I trusted him blindly. He took care of protecting me. Now I understood the bitter meaning of that word. Miguel and Valeria had taken over managing the finances, assuring me it was all very complicated, that there were debts, that I shouldn't worry. But something in their looks, in their urgency to sell me the idea that we were poor, didn't add up. Roberto was a hard-working man, a visionary who had started with a small hardware store and turned it into a prosperous construction supply business. He was always cautious with money. Debts, it was unlikely. The sliding door opened again. This time it was Valeria. She looked impeccable, as always, in a beige pantsuit, and her hair pulled back in a perfect bun. Her expensive perfume reached me before she did, a Swedish scent that felt artificial to me. "Good morning, Esperanza." She never called me Mom. "Mr. Castillo is coming today. Miguel and I will handle it. You rest. You wouldn't want to burden yourself with legal matters, would you?" Her tone was condescending, as if she were talking to a child or a senile pet. She looked me up and down, and her nose wrinkled slightly, as if the smell of me or the tent was offensive. "So you know," I said, keeping my voice as firm as I could. "Mr. Castillo is coming. As Roberto's widow, I have the right to be present." A shadow of irritation crossed her perfect face. "Of course, but we want to spare you unnecessary stress. You've already been through so much." Her smile was tight. "Besides, it's just paperwork. Miguel is your son. He will look after your interests." "My interests?" I thought bitterly. My interests seem to be limited to not getting the tent wet when it rains. "I would prefer to be there, Valeria." I looked her directly in the eyes, defiant. For a moment, I saw a flash of surprise in hers. I didn't usually oppose her. "Suit yourself," she said dryly. "But please make yourself presentable. You wouldn't want to look pitiful." She turned and went into the house, literally and figuratively shutting the door in my face. I was left trembling, not from cold, but from contained rage. Thor rubbed against me, emitting a small whine of concern. I got up with effort, each movement a small battle against rheumatism and indignity. My entire world was contained in an old suitcase and a plastic bag, 3 dresses, 2 changes of underwear, a worn-out sweater, and a faded photograph of Roberto and me on our wedding day. Him tall and proud in his suit. Me in a simple white dress, looking at him as if he were the center of my universe, because he was. Grabbing my old bag, I limped towards the guest bathroom, the only one I was allowed to use. It was small and impeccably clean, as if no one ever used it. I looked at myself in the mirror. An old woman with a face carved with wrinkles, tired eyes and white, disheveled hair looked back at me. Who was this woman? Where was the Esperanza who laughed, who loved, who lived? I washed my face with cold water, trying to refresh my thoughts. I combed my hair as best I could and put on the least worn dress, a navy blue one that Roberto had liked. I needed to face this day with a shred of dignity. When I came out of the bathroom, Sophia was waiting in the hallway. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Grandma, you look beautiful," she said, hugging me tightly. "Thank you, dear." Her hug was a balm. "Are you staying to listen?" "I am." She lowered her voice. "I don't trust them. Dad's not himself." Before I could answer, we heard the doorbell. A shiver ran down my back. Mr. Castillo had arrived. Miguel and Valeria greeted him with exaggerated cordiality. Mr. Castillo was a man in his 60s, with graying hair and a serious bearing. He carried a worn brown leather briefcase. His eyes, intelligent and perceptive, sought me out immediately. "Doña Esperanza," he said, ignoring Miguel and Valeria to address me directly. He took my hands in his. They were warm and firm. "It's good to see you, though I regret the circumstances. Roberto was a great man." "Thank you, Ramon," I whispered, using his first name for the first time in years. I felt my eyes moisten. Seeing him was like having a little piece of Roberto in the room. Valeria coughed. "Uncomfortable. Please, come into the living room, Mr. Castillo. Some coffee?" "No, thank you." His tone was curt. "I prefer to get down to business as soon as possible." We sat on the uncomfortable white sofas in the living room. Me at one end, near Sofia, Miguel and Valeria together, facing us like a tribunal. Mr. Castillo took a single armchair and placed his briefcase on the glass coffee table. "As you know," he began, "the succession of Roberto Mendoza has been in process. He was a very organized man. He left a very clear notarial will, which I have kept until all preliminary procedures were complete." Valeria leaned forward, her eyes shining with barely concealed avarice. "Yes, it's been such a long and complicated process. Miguel, as the only son, is eager to honor his father's memory and stabilize the situation." Mr. Castillo looked at her coldly. "The will does not refer only to Miguel." He opened the briefcase and took out a thick, official-looking brown envelope. He held it in his hands. Roberto was explicit. "This document is to be read in the presence of his wife, Esperanza Mendoza. She is the primary heir and executrix." The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the ticking of the wall clock and Valeria's ragged breathing. "Executrix?" asked Miguel, confused. "But Mom doesn't understand these things. I can—" "Miguel," Mr. Castillo interrupted him, in a voice that brooked no argument. "Your father trusted your mother's wisdom above all else. That is clear here." He broke the seal on the envelope and extracted several pages of parchment paper. He took a deep breath. I read the last will and testament of Roberto Alfonso Mendoza, dated 5 years ago. Every word from Mr. Castillo fell into the room like a slab of stone. Roberto began by stating his love for me, his dearest Esperanza, the light of his eyes and the love of his life. I cried silently, wiping my tears with the back of my trembling hand. Sofia squeezed my hand. Then came the substantial part, and the world stopped. "And hereby I give, devise, and bequeath to my beloved wife, Esperanza Garcia de Mendoza, the entirety of my estate, properties, and financial assets, to be her sole property and to dispose of as she sees fit." Valeria held her breath. "Among these assets," the lawyer continued, adjusting his glasses, "are 15 properties, the family home on Avenida de los Olivos, 2 apartments downtown, the commercial premises on Main Street, and 12 plots of land in the Las Colinas development." Miguel paled. 15 properties. But what about the hardware store? "The company Materiales Mendoza was sold in a private operation 3 years ago," Mr. Castillo said calmly. "Roberto invested the capital. The current liquid balance, in various accounts and investments, amounts to $25 million. The number floated in the room. Heavy, unreal, 25 million. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a fortune that I, the woman who slept in the garden, owned." Valeria jumped to her feet. "That's impossible," she shrieked, her strident voice breaking the spell. "He didn't have that much. We've been maintaining this house. We've been juggling." Mr. Castillo looked at her with contempt. "Ma'am, the accounts are clear. Roberto was a very shrewd investor, and I repeat, everything belongs to Doña Esperanza. The will is specific." "Miguel," he turned to my son, whose face was a mask of disbelief and confusion, "your father leaves you a sum of $100,000 as a gesture of his affection. To your daughter, Sofia, he leaves a university fund that will cover her studies and an additional sum for when she turns 25. 100,000. Miguel murmured, as if he didn't understand the words. "And my mother, everything." "That is correct." The lawyer gathered the documents. "Doña Esperanza has total control. She decides what to do with her inheritance. If she wishes to donate it, spend it, or of course if she wishes to help her family, it will be her decision." Valeria began pacing back and forth, like a caged lioness. "This is a fraud. That woman is not in her right mind. She can't manage that. She'll spend it all or be swindled. Miguel, say something. But Miguel couldn't speak. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something more than indifference or annoyance in his eyes. I saw fear, a deep, genuine fear. Mom, he managed to say, his voice broken. You wouldn't want that responsibility, would you? Let us help you. We can manage it for you, for your own good. His plea was pathetic. After all they had done, after relegating me to the garden, they were now asking me to give them control of a fortune. The irony was so bitter it almost made me laugh. I stood up. My legs were trembling, but not from weakness, but from a new, overwhelming emotion. Power. Vindication. I looked at my son, at his hysterical wife, and then at Mr. Castillo, whose gaze was one of silent support. No, I said. My voice was a whisper, but it resonated in the quiet room. I don't need your help, Miguel. Valeria lunged at me. You ungrateful old woman, we gave you shelter and food, and this is how you repay us. Shelter? I asked, and this time my voice was stronger. I pointed towards the garden, towards the tent visible through the glass. You call that shelter? Valeria? You call leftover food sustenance? Roberto didn't give me an inheritance. He gave me the key to my freedom. Mr. Castillo approached me. Esperanza, with your permission, we can go to my office. There is much to do. Transfer of accounts? Power of attorney? Yes, Ramon. I nodded. Let's get out of here. Now. No! Screamed Valeria, blocking the way. This isn't over. We'll contest the will. We'll say you weren't in your right mind when you signed it. The lawyer gave a cold smile. Ma'am, the will is irrevocable and was drafted when Roberto was of sound mind. Any challenge will be costly, and I assure you, you will lose. He lowered his voice, and his tone became dangerous. And if you insinuate anything about Doña Esperanza's mental capacity, rest assured I will press charges for elder abuse and neglect. I have witnesses. I have pictures. He looked deliberately towards the garden. That silenced her. She stood paralyzed, her mouth agape. Miguel sank into the sofa, covering his face with his hands. Sophia stood up and stood by my side. I'm going with my grandmother. I nodded. Proud, I took my plastic bag, the one that contained my entire reduced life. I needed nothing else. Everything that mattered was in those pages that Mr. Castillo now guarded in his briefcase. We walked towards the door. I stopped on the threshold and turned for the last time. I looked at my son, defeated on the white sofa of his chosen prison. I no longer felt anger, only a deep, heart-wrenching sorrow. Miguel, I said. He looked up, his eyes red. Your father loved you, but he loved me more, and he knew, God knows how, that this would be necessary, that he would need to protect me from you. I walked out of that house without looking back. The outside air had never smelled so sweet. Thor, who had been waiting by the door, came up and rubbed his head against my leg. Come on, boy, I murmured, scratching behind his ears. We're going home. Mr. Castillo opened the car door for me. I settled into the soft, warm leather seat. As we drove away, I saw the figure of my son through the picture window, watching us leave. It was a sad image, the end of something, but for me, it was a beginning. Mr. Castillo's office was the opposite of Valeria's house. Cozy, with wooden bookshelves full of books, family photographs, and a smell of real coffee and old paper. He offered me a comfortable armchair and a blanket for my legs, small gestures that returned my humanity. Over the next few hours, I signed documents, listened to explanations, and began to understand the magnitude of what Roberto had left me. It wasn't just money, it was security, independence, power. It was his way of telling me, from beyond, that he had always loved me and would never abandon me. What do you want to do, Esperanza? Mr. Castillo asked me, pouring me a cup of tea. You can buy a house, travel, whatever you wish. I looked out the window, at the city that had been my home for 60 years. First, I need a place to live, a place of my own, and I want to see my granddaughter. I want Sophia to know she always has a home with me. That can easily be arranged. He nodded. And Miguel? A pang of pain shot through my chest. I don't know, Ramon. He made his choices, now I must make mine. He arranged a suite for me in a discreet but elegant hotel. It was the first time in years that I slept in a large bed, with clean sheets and a solid roof over my head. That night, I lay down and cried. I cried for Roberto, for the love we shared. I cried for the son I had lost long before today. And I cried with relief, with an overwhelming gratitude towards the man who, even in death, had been my savior. The next morning, the phone in the room rang. It was Sophia. "Grandma, are you okay?" "Yes, my dear, I'm fine, very fine." "Grandma, Dad is devastated. Last night he and Valeria had a terrible fight. She left the house. I think they're going to separate." The news surprised me, but did not make me happy. "I'm sorry for him, Sophia." "Grandma, he wants to see you. He's outside the hotel. He says he needs to talk to you." I got up and went to the window. Down below on the sidewalk was the solitary figure of my son. He looked like he had aged 10 years in one night. He was wearing the same clothes as the day before, was disheveled, and was swaying slightly, as if struggling to stay upright. "Should I let him up?" asked Sophia, her voice trembling. My heart was torn between caution and a flicker of maternal hope. Was this another trick, or was there a chance, however remote, for redemption? Tell him to come up," I said finally. "But stay close." Minutes later, there was a soft knock at the door. When I opened it, I found Miguel. His eyes were swollen and red, and he smelled of sweat and sleeplessness. "Mom," he whispered, and his voice was that of a frightened child. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He collapsed to his knees on the threshold, buried his face in my dress, and began to sob with a despair that shook me to my core. It was the cry of a man who had hit rock bottom, who saw with brutal clarity the ugliness of his actions. I stood still, my hands suspended in the air, hesitant. Was this true remorse or just the fear of losing the fortune? Could I forgive the unforgivable? His sobs were the only sound in the room, and in the midst of that pain, I looked towards the nightstand where I had left, for the first time since receiving it, the leather briefcase Mr. Castillo had given me with copies of everything. And then, my eyes, clouded with tears, fixed on a detail I hadn't noticed before. In the worn inner lining of the briefcase, there was an almost imperceptible flap. Something gleamed faintly inside, like the edge of a photograph or a folded paper. It wasn't part of the official documents. It was something hidden, placed there with a secret intention. Miguel was still clinging to my legs, begging for forgiveness, but I could no longer hear him. My entire being, every fiber of my attention, was concentrated on that small silvery gleam, on that secret that Roberto, my shrewd and cautious Roberto, had left for only me to find, at the very moment my world was changing forever. I slowly reached out my hand, my heart pounding loudly in my chest. The sound of blood pumping in my ears drowned out my son's sobs. My trembling fingers closed around the edge of the paper peeking out from the hidden flap. I carefully pulled it out. It wasn't a photo, it was a smaller envelope, cream-colored, addressed to me in Roberto's unmistakable handwriting. The ink was slightly faded and written below my name, in capital letters that made my breath catch, a single terrifying word. Warning. The world shrank to that small cream-colored envelope in my hands. Miguel's heart-wrenching sobs kneeling at my feet became a distant background noise, an echo in a vacuum chamber. All that existed was the weight of the paper, the familiar elegance of Roberto's handwriting, and that word written with an urgency that pierced the page. Warning. My heart, which a moment before had been aching with pity for my son, turned into a fist of ice beating violently against my ribs. Warning. Against what? Against whom? Roberto had foreseen everything, down to the last detail of this scene. He had known this day would come, that I would find this message just when the son we raised together would break down at my feet. "Mom, please." Miguel groaned, his face streaked with tears and snot, clutching the fabric of my dress as if it were a lifeline. I don't know what came over me. It was Valeria. It was fear. "I swear I didn't mean to hurt you." His words bounced off me without penetrating. My eyes were fixed on the envelope. Sophia, pale and wide-eyed, watched the scene from the door, paralyzed between compassion for her father and worry for me. "Miguel," I managed to articulate, and my voice sounded strange, hoarse, as if it didn't belong to me. Get up. He shook his head, sinking deeper. I don't deserve to. Tell me you forgive me. Get up, I repeated, with a firmness that surprised even myself. It wasn't a shout, but an order laden with an authority I hadn't exercised in years. The tone worked. Miguel slowly rose to his feet. Swaying, his shoulders were hunched, his body a monument to defeat. He looked at me, seeking a glimmer of clemency in my eyes, but mine must have been veiled by a terror I couldn't disguise. Sophia, I said, without taking my eyes off the envelope, take your father to the bathroom. Let him wash his face. Get him a glass of water. Sophia nodded, understanding, and took Miguel by the arm with a tenderness that broke my heart. Come on, Dad. When they left the room, I closed the door with a soft click and leaned against it, feeling the solid wood against my back. The suite was luxurious, silent, too silent. The contrast with the emotional chaos boiling inside me was terrifying. With fingers that barely obeyed, I slid my nail under the flap of the envelope. It was sealed with wax, a detail so characteristic of Roberto. I broke the seal with a dry snap that echoed in the room. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper, the same thick note paper he always used for his most important notes. The handwriting was his, but shakier, as if written under great pressure or emotion. My dearest Esperanza, if you are reading this, then my plan has worked, and because I fear my worst fears about our son have come true. A pang of pain, sharp and deep, shot through my chest. His worst fears. Roberto had always been the optimist, the one who saw the best in people. I was the cautious one, but in the end it was he who had prepared this safety net, who had anticipated the betrayal. I bear no grudge towards Miguel. The love we have for him is stronger than any mistake. But the world, my love, is a place full of shadows, and ambition can cloud the purest heart. Valeria is dangerous, not out of innate malice, but from a greed that knows no bounds. And I fear she has dragged our son into an abyss from which he may not escape. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the trembling in my hands. I looked towards the bathroom door, behind which my son was recomposing himself. Dangerous. The word resonated with a sinister truth. The fortune I have left you is yours. It is your shield and your freedom, but it is also a magnet for vultures. Therefore, I have taken one final precaution. The money, the 25 million, is not simply in bank accounts. My eyes widened. What did he mean? I have converted the bulk of the capital into something more stable and, above all, harder to plunder. Rough diamonds, certified, and with a clear market value. They are stored in a safety deposit box at the National Vault, under a code that only you and Ramon Castillo know. The property deeds are in your name, non-transferable, without your notarized signature. But the diamonds are your true fortress. Diamonds. Roberto, who always distrusted ostentation, had turned our fortune into gemstones. It was brilliant. It was untraceable for someone like Valeria, impossible to transfer without my explicit consent. Now comes the true warning, my love. And for this I ask you to be strong, as you have always been. I felt an icy cold run down my spine. I gripped the paper tighter. 2 years ago, I started to feel unwell. Very unwell. The doctors said it was my heart. Stress. But I wasn't so sure. The symptoms were strange. Dizziness, weakness, momentary confusion. They always coincided with Valeria's visits, when she was especially solicitous, bringing me teas and vitamin supplements that, she said, would help me. The air escaped my lungs. A horrible suspicion began to germinate in my mind, so monstrous that I tried to reject it immediately. I have no proof, Esperanza, only the foreboding of an old man who knows human nature. That is why, before I died, I changed my diet radically. I got rid of all those gifts, and in secret, I asked Ramon that, if my death was sudden or suspicious, he should keep this envelope for you to find when you were safe. Tears blurred my vision. Was he saying what I thought he was? That Roberto suspected that they had tried to poison him? That Valeria could have? I couldn't finish the thought. It was too horrible. Again, I have no proof. Only the instinct of a husband who wants to protect his wife until his last breath. Be careful of her, Esperanza, and take care of Miguel. He is a victim of his own weakness, but above all, take care of yourself. You are the most valuable legacy of my life. The money, the properties, all that is paper. You are my treasure." The letter ended with his usual signature, large and confident. "With all my love forever, Roberto." The paper fell from my trembling hands and floated to the carpeted floor. I brought my hands to my mouth to stifle a scream, a sob, something, but only a dry gasp came out, a sound of pure terror. It wasn't just the inheritance, it was his life. Roberto might have been murdered, and the prime suspect was the woman who was now outside, probably plotting her next move. A soft knock on the door made me jump. "Grandma." It was Sophia's voice, soft and worried. "Are you okay?" "Dad is a little better." I grabbed the letter from the floor, folded it hastily, and put it in the pocket of my dress, next to my heart, which seemed to want to leap out of my chest. I wiped my tears furiously, trying to compose my face. I couldn't frighten them. Not yet. "Open the door, dear," I said, striving to sound calm. Sophia entered, followed by a washed, pale but calmer Miguel. His swollen eyes searched mine anxiously. "Mom, about the inheritance," he began, in a weak voice. "That can wait, Miguel," I interrupted, more abruptly than I intended. "Now is not the time." He looked down, ashamed. "You're right, I'm sorry. I want you to know that I didn't know about the amount. Valeria told me Dad had debts, that we were on the brink of ruin. I'm an idiot. I believed everything." "Where is Valeria now?" I asked, trying to make the question sound casual, though every syllable burned my tongue. Miguel shrugged, a helpless gesture. "She's gone. She packed her bags and left. She said she couldn't be with such a weak man, that he had ruined our only chance." His voice broke. "She said horrible things about you, Mom, that you were a cunning witch who had manipulated Dad until the end." Valeria's hatred didn't surprise me, but her past actions did. Every word of Roberto's letter resonated in my mind like a funeral drum. Dizziness, weakness, confusion, always with Valeria's visits. "Miguel," I said, choosing my words with the care of someone walking on broken glass. "When your father got sick, those last months, did you notice anything strange?" He frowned, confused by the change of subject. "Strange? No. Well, he was down, tired. The doctors said it was his age, his heart, and Valeria." "How did she behave with him?" Miguel seemed to think for the first time. "She was very attentive, more than usual. She brought him special meals, teas. She said she wanted to help him recover." Suddenly, his eyes clouded with a memory. "Once, I remember Dad complained that a tea tasted bitter. Valeria laughed and said it was the medicinal herbs. That's how they were. A bitter tea. Vitamin supplements." The suspicion coiled in my stomach like a venomous snake. I had to talk to Ramon Castillo. Immediately. At that moment, the phone in the suite rang, strident in the tense silence. All three of us jumped. I picked it up cautiously. "Doña Esperanza." It was the deep, calm voice of Mr. Castillo. "I just wanted to make sure everything is all right." "Ramon," I said, and noticed how my voice trembled despite my efforts. "I need to see you, now. It's urgent." There was a pause on the other end of the line, catching my tone. "Of course. I'm at the office. Can you come?" "Yes. I'm coming right now." I hung up and turned to Miguel and Sofia. "I have to see Mr. Castillo, pending matters." "I'm coming with you," Miguel said immediately, with a flash of his old determination, now tinged with a desperation to reconcile. I shook my head firmly. "No, it's better if I go alone. You stay here, rest, we'll talk later." The disappointment on his face was palpable, but I didn't care. I couldn't trust him. Not yet. Not with Roberto's warning seared into my mind. "Grandma, I can go with you," Sophia offered, her gaze full of an understanding beyond her years. She seemed to sense that something serious was happening. I nodded. "Yes, Sophia, come with me." We rode down the elevator in silence. I held my purse tightly, feeling the edge of Roberto's envelope through the fabric of my dress. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his shaky handwriting, the word warning. The taxi took us to Ramon Castillo's office. He was waiting at the door, his face serious. When he saw me, his expression softened with concern. Esperanza, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Something like that, Ramon, I murmured, entering and collapsing into the leather armchair. Sophia sat beside me, taking my hand. I handed him the crumpled envelope. This was hidden in the briefcase. Read it. Ramon took the paper, put on his glasses, and began to read. As he did, his face transformed. Surprise gave way to disbelief, and then to a deep, dark anger. When he finished, he laid the letter on the desk with a trembling hand. My God, he breathed, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes. Roberto, he was always the smartest man in the room. Did you know anything about this, Ramon? I asked, desperately seeking an anchor in reality. I knew he distrusted Valeria, that he had taken extreme precautions with the will. But this, the symptoms, the suspicion, he shook his head, dismayed. No, I had no idea. He never told me so clearly. He only insisted that the will must be irrevocable and that you must have total control away from her influence. Do you think that she could have? I couldn't finish the sentence. Ramon sighed, a sound laden with grief. Esperanza, without proof, it's only a terrible suspicion. But Roberto was not a man given to paranoia. If he thought it possible, he left the sentence hanging in the air, and its meaning enveloped the three of us like a toxic fog. The diamonds, I said, changing the subject. I needed a plan, action. I couldn't afford to be paralyzed by horror. Where are they? At the National Vault, as it says, under maximum security. The code is a combination only the two of us know. The date you met, followed by your mother's first name. A code that only Roberto and I could know. A last gesture of intimacy. Tears came to my eyes again, but this time they were of a pain mixed with infinite tenderness. We must proceed with caution, said Ramon, regaining his professionalism. If Valeria is capable of what Roberto suspected, now that she knows she will get nothing, she could become unpredictable. Do you think that I am in danger? I asked, and my voice sounded small and fragile, like a child's. Ramon looked me directly in the eyes. After reading this, Esperanza, I think it would be negligence not to take precautions. At that moment, Sophia's cell phone vibrated. She took it out and looked at the screen. Her face fell. It's Valeria, she whispered, showing us the phone. What does she want? I asked, holding my breath. She sent a text. Sophia read it aloud, her voice trembling. Sophia, honey, I know you're with your grandmother. Tell her I need to talk to her. It's urgent. It's about Miguel. Something terrible has happened. Please answer. The message was a clear manipulation, a hook to lure me in, but the mention of Miguel, that something terrible had happened, made my heart leap. Despite everything, he was my son. Don't answer, Ramon said firmly. It's a trap. She wants access to you. But what if it's true? I asked, my voice broken with anguish. What if Miguel has done something foolish? Miguel is at the hotel. Esperanza. Let's call the room to make sure. Ramon dialed the hotel number and asked to be connected to our suite. We waited an eternity of seconds. No one answered. The silence in the room became oppressive. Anxiety seized me. What if Valeria wasn't lying? What if Miguel, in his state of shock and desperation, had done something irreversible? We have to go back, I said, standing up. The world was spinning around me. Roberto's warning, Miguel's disappearance, Valeria's message, everything was mixing into a perfect storm of fear. Esperanza. That's what she wants, Ramon insisted, but I could no longer think clearly. He's my son, Ramon, I cried, and the cry came from a deep, primal place within me. I can't abandon him, even if he failed me, not after what I just read. Sophia stood by my side. Grandma is right. We can't leave him alone. Ramon looked at our determined faces and sighed, resigned. All right, but you're not going alone. I'm coming with you, and we'll call the police on the way, just in case. The taxi ride back to the hotel was the longest of my life. Every red light was torture. I looked out the window, seeing people passing by with their normal lives, unaware of the hell unfolding in mine. When we arrived, we hurried into the hotel. As we approached the suite, I noticed the door was ajar. My heart stopped. Miguel? I called, pushing the door open carefully. The room was empty. The bed was unmade, and on the nightstand was an overturned glass of water. There was no sign of a struggle, but no sign of Miguel either. "Miguel?" I called again, louder, my voice shaking with panic. Then, from the bathroom, came a sound, a low, pained moan. We ran towards it. The bathroom door was also open, and there, collapsed on the floor next to the toilet, was Miguel. He was pale, sweaty, and clutching his stomach tightly. Beside him on the floor was a small, empty glass vial, with a handwritten label I couldn't read. "Miguel!" I screamed, falling to my knees beside him. I touched his forehead. It was cold and clammy. He opened his eyes, glassy, and looked at me. His lips moved, forming words I could barely hear. "Mom. I'm sorry, she gave me, said it would help me sleep." Sophia, behind me, screamed. Ramon took out his phone and dialed emergency with trembling fingers. I held my son's face, looking into his dilated pupils. The vial on the floor, the label, Valeria. She had been here. She had given him something, the same supplement she gave Roberto. "Hold on, Miguel. Hold on," I begged, tears falling on his face. "Help is on the way." He tried to smile, a twisted, pathetic grimace. "Do you forgive me, Mom?" "Shut up. Don't talk. Save your strength," I ordered, but it was useless. The damage was done. As we waited for the ambulance, cradling my son's head in my lap, I looked at Ramon. His eyes reflected the same horrified understanding I felt. Roberto's warning was no longer a suspicion. It was a nightmare come true. Valeria had not been content with the money. She had returned, and had tried to finish off my son, perhaps to punish me, perhaps to silence him, perhaps in an act of pure evil. And as the sirens grew closer in the distance, I knew, with a certainty that froze my soul, that this was not over, that the battle for my family, for Roberto's memory, and for my own life had only just begun, and that the woman my son had loved was capable of anything. The sirens pierced the brain like needles, getting closer and closer until the deafening sound filled the hotel parking lot. The door to the suite burst open and a troop of paramedics in orange jackets invaded the space, turning the intimate drama into a scene of public chaos. "Clear the area. We need space," one of them shouted, kneeling beside Miguel, who lay in my arms, growing paler, more distant. His expert, firm hands gently but undoubtedly moved me aside. "Ma'am, we need to attend to him." I stood up unsteadily, leaning on Sophia, who was crying silently, clinging to my arm. I watched as they put a cervical collar on him, inserted an IV into his arm, placed an oxygen mask over his face. His chest rose with difficulty. The empty vial had been picked up with tweezers and placed in a plastic bag by one of the paramedics, whose face was a mask of impassive professionalism. "What did he take?" asked the one who seemed to be the team leader, without stopping his work on Miguel. I don't know," I stammered, feeling useless. "A vial, his wife, she was here." The man nodded, writing something on a clipboard, probably an overdose of some sedative or anxiolytic. "The symptoms match. Is the wife present?" "No," interjected Ramon Castillo, with an authoritative voice. "She's gone. We believe she was the one who administered the substance." The paramedic's eyes met Ramon's, and a tacit understanding passed between them. "The police will have to deal with that. For now, we're taking him to General Hospital. It's the closest with a toxicology unit." They loaded Miguel, now unconscious, onto a gurney. The wheels squeaked on the tiled floor as they took him out of the suite. We followed like sleepwalkers, a trio of shattered souls in the carpeted hallway, riding down the elevator that smelled of disinfectant and fear. The ambulance ride was a blur of red lights reflecting off the grim faces of the paramedics. I sat in the back, holding Miguel's cold hand, praying silently to a God I hadn't invoked in years. Sophia and Ramon followed us in a taxi. Every bump in the road made my heart jump. Every beep from the monitor tracking his vitals was a lash of anxiety. In the emergency room, time lost all meaning. They left us in a cold waiting room, with blue plastic chairs and worn cream-colored walls. The smell of chlorine and hopelessness was omnipresent. Sophia curled up next to me, shivering despite the mild temperature. Ramon came and went, talking on the phone in a low voice, his face a mask of worry. "The police are on their way," he informed us at one point. "They've located Valeria's car abandoned near the airport. It seems she has fled." The news did not surprise me, but it terrified me. She was loose, and if she was capable of poisoning her own husband, what wasn't she capable of? After an eternity, a young doctor, with her hair in a ponytail and deep dark circles under her eyes, approached us. "Family of Miguel Mendoza." We jumped to our feet. "Yes, I'm his mother. How is he?" "Stable," said the doctor, and a collective sigh of relief escaped our lips. "He's been very lucky. He ingested a very high dose of benzodiazepines, a potent sedative. If he hadn't been found in time, well, he was. We've performed gastric lavage and administered an antagonist. He's asleep, but out of danger." "Can we see him?" I asked. My voice cracked with emotion. "One moment, only one of you. He's in the ICU for observation." I looked at Sophia and Ramon. "I'll go." The doctor led me through a maze of bright, shiny hallways to a semi-private room where Miguel lay in a metal bed, connected to a tangle of wires and tubes. He looked small and vulnerable, like the child he once was. His breathing was regular, but artificial. I stroked his hand, noticing the coldness of his skin. "Miguel," I whispered, leaning close to his ear. "It's Mom. You're safe." His eyelids fluttered slightly, but did not open. However, I felt a slight squeeze on my fingers. He was listening. He was there. I sat by his side, watching every movement of his chest, every line on the monitor. The hours passed. The police arrived, took my statement with distant courtesy. I told them everything, from my confinement in the garden to Roberto's letter, omitting only the most intimate details of the inheritance. Their faces were impassive, but I saw disbelief in their eyes. It was a nightmare story, too twisted to be invented. "We'll find Mrs. Valeria," a middle-aged officer assured me, with a hint of genuine compassion. "In the meantime, be careful." When they left, darkness had fallen outside the hospital windows. Ramon had gone to attend to urgent matters, promising to return first thing in the morning. Sophia dozed in a chair in the waiting room, exhausted. I was alone with my son, and with my thoughts. Roberto's letter burned in my pocket. His words, "Take care of Miguel. He is a victim of his own weakness," resonated in the quiet of the room. I looked at my son's gaunt face, the shadows under his eyes, his parted mouth. I no longer felt anger. The anger had been consumed in the fire of fear and worry. What remained was immense sorrow, a dull pain for the man he had become, and for the sweet, affectionate child he had been. I remembered when he was 5 years old and fell off the swing in the garden. I ran to him, picked him up in my arms, and he buried his crying face in my neck, saying, "Mommy, you make it better." Now, decades later, he was hurt again. And again I was there. But this time, the wound was not physical. It was of the soul, and I didn't know if I had the power to heal it. "Miguel," I whispered again, fighting the sleep that clouded my vision. "I forgive you." I don't know if he heard it, but I needed to say it. The forgiveness wasn't for him. Not yet. It was for me. It was to release the weight of resentment that had anchored me to misery. Roberto had given me financial freedom. Now I had to earn my emotional freedom. Suddenly, Miguel's hand moved. His fingers interlaced with mine, with a strength that surprised me. He opened his eyes. They were clouded by the sedatives, but conscious. He looked at me, and in their depth I saw a glimmer of the clarity that had been absent for so long. "Mom," he murmured, his voice hoarse and weak. The box." I leaned closer. "What box, son?" "Dad gave me a box. Years ago," he said, "to only open it if everything went to hell." He swallowed with difficulty. "It's in the storage unit, the small one, at the old hardware store." A box. Roberto had given Miguel a box. Why? What did it contain? Was it another layer of his contingency plan? "What's inside, Miguel?" I asked gently. He shook his head, an almost imperceptible movement. "I didn't open it. He made me promise." He said it contained the truth. About him. About everything. His eyelids closed heavily. "The key. I have it. On my keychain." The car keys. Exhausted by the effort, he sank back into a deep sleep. But his confession had opened a new door in the darkness. Roberto had not only left me a warning, he had left a truth for Miguel. A truth that could change everything. I remained by his side until the sun began to filter through the blinds, painting stripes of golden light on the gray floor. When Ramon and Sofia arrived, fresh but still worried, I told them what Miguel had told me. Ramon frowned. The old hardware store. We sold it years ago, but the deal included a small storage locker that Roberto always insisted on keeping. He said it was for memories. I never thought. We have to go, I said, with a new determination. We have to find that box. Ramon nodded. I'll go right now. You stay with Miguel. I'm going with you, Mr. Castillo, said Sofia, firmly. Grandma should stay here, in case Dad wakes up. I knew they were right. With a knot of anxiety in my stomach, I gave them Miguel's car keys, which I had picked up from the hotel. After they left, I felt more alone than ever. The hospital room was a world apart, a limbo where time was measured by the beeps of machines and nurses' rounds. Miguel woke up from time to time, drank a little water, and went back to sleep. Each time he opened his eyes, he looked at me with renewed clarity, as if the overdose had washed a layer of fog from his mind. At noon, as I was giving him a drink with a straw, he looked at me intently. About the garden, Mom, he said, his voice a little stronger. I never should have allowed it. I ask for your forgiveness. Truly. Tears came to my eyes, but this time they were of a glimmer of hope. It's over, Miguel. What matters is that you're okay. Valeria, his voice broke when he said her name. She manipulated me, made me feel small, incompetent, told me that without her, I was nothing. That you and Dad had raised me as a weakling. He looked down ashamed, and in the end I believed her lie. It was the confession I had been waiting for, not an excuse, but an explanation, and in it I saw the path to reconciliation, long, difficult, but possible. At that moment, the door to the room opened, and Ramon appeared, followed by Sofia. They carried with them a small, rectangular box of dark cedar wood, with tarnished brass fittings. It was simple, but well made, the kind of box made to last for generations. We found it, Ramon announced, placing it carefully on the rolling table next to the bed. It was hidden behind some old toolboxes. Miguel's key worked. The four of us looked at the box. It was an inanimate object, but it seemed to contain a latent energy, a secret that had waited years to be revealed. Open it, Mom, said Miguel, in a weak but firm voice. It's yours. Dad left it for you. Through me. With trembling hands, I took the small, rusty key that Ramon handed me. I inserted it into the lock of the box. It turned with a soft, satisfying click. I held my breath and lifted the lid. Inside, there were no diamonds, no legal documents, nothing of material value. There was only a bundle of letters tied with a ribbon, and on top of them, a photograph. The photograph was old, black and white. It showed Roberto, young with thick, dark hair, smiling with carefree happiness. He had his arm around the shoulders of another woman. It wasn't me. She was pretty, with a kind face and light eyes, and she was holding a baby a few months old in her arms. I turned the photo over. On the back, in Roberto's handwriting, it said Isabel and Miguel, 1975. 1975. The year Miguel was born. My mind, numb with fatigue and shock, struggled to process what I was seeing. Who was Isabel? Why was Roberto with her and a baby who was, without a doubt, our son Miguel? With a horrible premonition, I took the first letter from the bundle. The paper was yellowed and fragile. The handwriting was feminine, elegant. Dear Roberto, Miguel said his first word today. It was Data. I know it hurts not to be here to hear it, but I want you to know that I talk to him about you every day. I tell him that his father is a good and brave man, who loves us very much but has another family to attend to. The letter fell from my hands. The world was spinning. I couldn't breathe. No, it wasn't possible. Roberto. My Roberto. The man with whom I shared 52 years of my life, had another family, or at least, another child, and that child was Miguel? I grabbed another letter. And another. They were all from Isabel, letters full of love, updates on Miguel's growth, a sad but serene resignation. They spoke of an agreement, of a secret they had kept for years. Roberto sent them money, visited them in secret. Isabel knew of my existence and accepted her role as the second family. Miguel from the bed saw the paleness of my face. "Mom? What's wrong? What is it?" I couldn't speak. I looked at my son, the man I had raised as my own since he was born. Was it possible? I remembered the birth, the clinic, Roberto holding Miguel for the first time. Had it all been a lie? Had he adopted another woman's son and passed him off as his own? Ramon, who had read one of the letters I had dropped, had a face contorted in a grimace of horror and pity. "Esperanza," he murmured, but could not continue. Sophia, confused, took the photograph. "Grandma, who is this woman? She looks like Dad." And it was true. Now that I looked, Miguel had the light eyes of the woman in the photograph, Isabel, not my dark eyes, not Roberto's. My whole life, all my love, all my motherhood, crumbled in an instant. Roberto's great love had been a farce. The family we built had been erected on the rotten foundations of a monumental lie. Miguel, seeing our faces, tried to sit up. "Tell me what's going on." His voice was a hoarse cry of desperation. I showed him the photograph. "Miguel, this woman, Isabel, is your biological mother." He looked at the photo, then at me, his eyes reflecting the same devastating disbelief I felt. "What? No, that's impossible. You are my mother." "It seems that I'm not," I said, and the words tasted like ash. "It seems that Roberto was your father, but Isabel was your mother. I raised you as if you were mine." The silence that followed was more eloquent than any scream. Miguel sank into the pillows, his face a mask of confusion and pain. Sophia cried silently, hugging herself. And I stood there holding the proof of Roberto's deepest betrayal in my hands. It hadn't just been Valeria. The lies and deception came from much further back, from the very foundations of our marriage. The warning letter had only been the beginning. This box, this truth, was the final blow. Roberto had not only protected me with money, he had condemned me with a secret that would forever shatter the memory of the love we believed we shared. I looked at Miguel, my son not son, and in his eyes I saw the same abyss that was opening in mine. We were no longer mother and son. We were two victims of the same lie, two castaways in a sea of betrayal. And in that moment, as the revelation enveloped us in its cold embrace, I knew that the fortune, the diamonds, the freedom, none of it mattered. Roberto had bequeathed me wealth, but he had robbed me of my past. And now, he left me and Miguel facing the most painful question of all. If it had all been a lie, what was left that was true? The silence in the hospital room was so thick you could feel it, a physical weight that oppressed the chest and made every breath an effort. The photograph of Roberto, Isabel, and the baby Miguel lay on the white blanket, a stain of the past poisoning the present. The letters, tied with their innocent ribbon, seemed to scream from the cedar box. Miguel did not cry. He did not scream. He simply looked at the photo with an expression of absolute emptiness, as if someone had disconnected his soul. His eyes, those light eyes that I now understood were not mine, scanned the faces in the photograph over and over, seeking a truth his mind refused to accept. "It's a lie," he murmured, finally, his voice a broken thread. "It has to be." Ramon, pale and visibly affected, took another letter from the bundle. He read it silently, and then, with a trembling hand, handed it to me. "Esperanza, this clarifies things a little, or complicates everything." It was a letter from Roberto, addressed to Isabel. The date was from almost 40 years ago. "My dear Isabel, thank you for your understanding. I know it's not easy. Watching Miguel grow up through your letters is both a blessing and a torture. Esperanza is a wonderful mother to him. She loves him with all her soul. Sometimes, when I see them together, the remorse consumes me, but I know it was the right decision. You were not ready to be a mother, and I could not give him my name without destroying Esperanza. This is the life we chose, the burden we must bear. Take care of our son, and remember, the secret dies with us." The letter fell from my hands. It wasn't a love story. It was a story of obligation, of a mistake, of a child born from a relationship Roberto had kept secret. Miguel was his biological son, yes, but I was not his mother. Had I been a nanny? The naive wife who raised her husband's son with another woman. The pain was so sharp, so visceral, that I doubled over, gripping the edge of the bed to keep from falling. It wasn't the pain of the betrayal, but the pain of invalidation. 52 years of love, of care, of sleepless nights, of laughter and tears, all reduced to a farce. My motherhood, the central pillar of my identity, was a house of cards built on a lie. Grandma, Sophia sobbed, hugging me. Her touch, so pure and full of a love that was real, anchored me to reality. Miguel looked up. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw not the weak, manipulated man, but a frightened and confused child, just like me. "Why?" he asked, his voice broken. "Why did they lie to me my whole life?" "Out of cowardice, Miguel," said Ramon, with deep bitterness in his voice. "Roberto was a great man in many ways, but in this, he was a coward. He didn't want to face the consequences of his actions. He gave you a life, a family, but he robbed you of your truth." "And her?" Miguel pointed to the photo of Isabel. "What happened to her?" I searched among the letters. I found a more recent one, from about 10 years ago. It was from a lawyer, addressed to Roberto. "Dear Mr. Mendoza, we inform you that our client, Isabel Martinez, passed away peacefully last month after a brief illness. According to her wishes, her ashes were scattered at sea. She left no direct heirs except for the son you know. We reiterate her desire for the secret to be maintained, so as not to disrupt your life. Isabel had died, without ever claiming her son. She had accepted her role in the shadows. Out of love, out of respect, or out of fear, we would never know." Miguel sank back against the pillows, exhausted physically and emotionally. "It's all a lie," he repeated, but this time there was a heart-wrenching acceptance in his tone. I dried my tears with force. The pain had not gone away, but a cold fury began to make its way through the shock. Roberto had lied to me. He had used me, but there was one thing his lie could not change. I approached the bed and took Miguel's hand. He flinched but did not withdraw it. "Listen to me, Miguel," I said, and my voice sounded strangely firm, as if another, stronger woman were speaking through me. "Yes, they lied. Roberto and Isabel. They lied to both of us. But there is a truth that is bigger than all their lies." He looked at me, waiting. "The truth is that I held you in my arms when you had colic. The truth is that I taught you to tie your shoelaces, to ride a bike. The truth is that I stayed up with you when you had a fever, that I celebrated your triumphs and suffered your failures." My tears flowed again, but now they were clean, pure. "The truth, Miguel, is that I love you. Not because Roberto forced me to. Not out of duty. I love you because you are my son. Because the blood of the womb doesn't mean a damn thing compared to the blood of the heart, the blood shared on scary nights, on days of laughter, in years of life together." Miguel looked at me, and for the first time in years I saw a spark of true light in his eyes, an understanding that went beyond pain and betrayal. "You are my mother," he whispered, and it was an affirmation, not a question. "You have always been my mother." Yes, in the only sense that truly mattered. Roberto may have lied about the origins, but he could not falsify the decades of unconditional love I had given Miguel. That was mine. It was real. Sophia came over and hugged us both, forming a circle of 3, united not by blood, but by choice, and by a love that had been tested by fire, and had emerged, battered but intact. Ramon, his eyes shining, cleared his throat. "There are more things in the box." Beneath the letters, there was a thicker envelope. I opened it. It contained legal documents, Miguel's birth certificate, which listed him as the son of Roberto and an unknown mother, and a holographic will from Isabel, leaving all her belongings, a few shares and a small house on the coast, to my dear son Miguel Mendoza, in the hope that one day he will know the truth and forgive me. And there was one last letter from Roberto, addressed to me. The handwriting was shaky, written near the end. "My dearest Esperanza, if you are reading this, then the worst has happened, and Miguel has had to open the box, and it also means that I have failed to protect you from the pain I always feared. No apology is enough for the lie on which I built our life. I robbed you of the truth about Miguel's maternity. It was selfish. It was cowardly, But please believe me when I tell you that I never robbed you of love. I loved you from the first day I saw you until my last breath, and I admire you more than words can express. You raised Miguel with a kindness and strength that Isabel, in her lost youth, could never have given him. You gave him a real mother. You are his mother in every sense that matters, and for that, even if you hate me for this lie, I beg you not to let it destroy the bond that unites you. It is the most valuable legacy I leave. Take care of our son, and take care of yourself. You are and always will be the love of my life, with all the love of an imperfect and repentant man. Roberto. I read the letter aloud. When I finished, silence filled the room again, but this time it was a different silence, less charged with rage, more filled with a deep, understanding sadness. Roberto was not a monster. He was a man who had made a monumental mistake and had lived with it, tormented, for decades. His love for me, perhaps, had been real, but it had been tarnished by a lie that now exploded in the faces of those of us who remained. Miguel reached out and took the letter. He read it himself, his lips moving silently. When he finished, he pressed it to his chest. He did love me, didn't he? He asked, with the voice of a small child. Yes, Miguel, I said, with certainty. He loved you, in his own clumsy and flawed way, but he loved you, and me too. The revelation did not erase the pain of the betrayal, of the years of lies, of the tarnished image of Roberto, would take years to heal, if it ever healed completely. But something had been mended in that hospital room. The bond between Miguel and me, which Valeria had tried to destroy with her evil, and which Roberto's truth had shattered, was being rebuilt with a new material authenticity. There were no more secrets between us. We were two damaged adults, facing the truth of their past, but we were doing it together. Days later, Miguel was discharged from the hospital. We did not return to Valeria's house. With Ramon's help, we rented a spacious, bright apartment, with a view of the sea, a place that held no ghosts of the past. A place to start anew. The police found Valeria a week later, trying to board a flight to a country with no extradition. She was arrested and charged with attempted murder and elder abuse. Her trial would be long, but earthly justice was taking its course. One afternoon, sitting on the balcony of the new apartment, watching the sun set over the water, Miguel broke the silence. Mom, he said. It was the first time he had called me that since the revelation. The words sounded true, chosen. I want to visit Isabel's grave. Just to make peace. I nodded. We'll go together. And so we did. There was no headstone, as her ashes had been scattered, but we went to the cliff the lawyer had indicated. The wind blew strongly, tearing the tears from our eyes before they could fall. Miguel stood there in silence for a long time, saying goodbye to the mother he never knew and forgiving the shadow that had loomed over his life. I stood by his side, his mother, the mother who had rocked him, sung to him, raised him, the real mother. Roberto's fortune, the diamonds, the properties, in the end, they were not important. I used them to secure our future, to give Sophia the education she deserved, to help other elderly people in abusive situations. But the true wealth that Roberto bequeathed me, unknowingly, was the opportunity to rebuild my relationship with Miguel on honest foundations. Sometimes at night, when the pain of the betrayal woke me, I would take Roberto's last letter and reread it. I no longer felt anger. I felt pity. Pity for the man who had to carry his secret all his life, and I felt gratitude. Gratitude for having given me, despite everything, the gift of motherhood. Thor, the old German shepherd, now lives with us in the apartment. He sleeps at the foot of my bed, on a soft rug. It's no longer cold at night. Today Miguel has started therapy. So have I. We talk about what happened. We cry. Sometimes we even laugh, with that bitter healing laughter of those who have survived a storm. Life is not a fairy tale. There is no perfect ending. The scars of betrayal and abuse will always be there. But wounds can close, and sometimes, from the ashes of a lie, a stronger, more conscious, truer love can be born. My name is Esperanza Mendoza. I am 78 years old. I slept in a garden, next to a dog, believing I had lost everything. I found a fortune, but I also found a devastating truth. And in the end, I discovered that the only inheritance that really matters is not in banks or safes. It is in the human heart's capacity to forgive, to rebuild itself, and against all odds to find hope again.